Okay, so welcome to the GDG meetup, BYU style. Like Sean said, we're going to be talking about angular filters. I know probably most of you should be familiar with what an angular filter is and how to use it, but we're going to kind of go into depth. We're going to make a nice complex filter that provides us with behavior that Angular doesn't give us out of the box. One of the things I really love about angular filters is how simple they are. It's essentially just a function that takes some input and produces some output. So it's really easy to test. It's really easy to find out if it's working or not. And so we're going to go through and do a few things. Is that readable for everybody? Does that need to be bigger? Yep. Okay. So we've got this little app here, and right now it's not doing anything. Before we can actually do anything with it, we need to get some data in our controller. So I've got my controller defined here, and we're going to stick some data in there that I have already created for us. So I don't know if you know about .constant, but there's a few things you can create off of modules. A constant is really just a shortcut to a factory or a service, but this is a factory or a service that can never change. So you can actually inject it in a config block in your app. So if you've got some constants or some things you want to use that you know don't need to change, you can put them in a constant. You can actually access them in a config as if it were a provider. So we just defined this nice list of people. They got some colorful names. And then we're going to use it. So we will inject it. And then you're all used to using scope. But I'm not going to use scope because I'm using the controller as syntax. So I define my controller like this, and then I get a reference to this instance, and then I can look at control.people. So this is nice if you don't want to have to deal with putting scope everywhere in your controllers. So now if we come over here, come on Angular, yeah. So there we go. We've got some data, and we want to be able to filter over it. So there are a few things we can do. I've got this input up here, and I've defined a model called control.search. And we're going to use it to filter. So when you use a filter in Angular, you can use it over anything. You just need to make sure that the filter supports whatever you're passing into it. So essentially look at everything on the right side of this pipe as some function that is expecting some input, and everything on the left side as the input to the filter. So in this case, we are passing it control.people. So that array of people is what's getting passed to the filter, and the filter is called filter. It's the filter. That's what it's actually called. And you can colon separate additional parameters that you pass to that filter. So you may have a filter where you actually pass it other parameters that you use to manipulate the first parameter that you get, which is generally the list or whatever you're filtering over. So in our case, we want to filter over the list of people, and we are going to use the parameter, not search, control.search, and filter over it. So now if we come here, I can start typing things like Pistol Pete, and I get Pete. I can start typing things like 23A8, because that's his favorite color. So for free, I automatically have the ability to filter over every property on that object, including properties that are not visible that I haven't shown here in the index. So I'm only iterating over their name, favorite color, and birthday. But if you look at the data, they also each have this array of likables, and I can actually filter over those too. So everybody that likes cats, I can filter over, even though that's not visible. But that's not that useful, and if I wanted to look up like January, obviously that's not working. So Angular's failing us here. And say I wanted to find everybody named Pistol or Sally, so I start typing, oh, well, it's not exactly what I want. So let's make another filter that's a little bit more powerful. So what we will do is look at the filter that's already here. So there's a filter that I made called Better Filter, and we don't need that. We're just going to pass it control.search. So otherwise it's the same. All we're changing is the filter that we're using. And let's go look at this filter. So we're not going to write this filter together, but we're going to write another one together. What this filter essentially does is it takes the list that we pass in as the first parameter, and the text that we type in as the second parameter. And then this just kind of makes sure that the array is defined, that if we haven't typed anything in the filter, that the list still shows up. And then what we do is we actually slice or split open the queries, because we want to treat every space-separated value as an additional query. And so what we do is we break up whatever's typed into that input box into multiple queries, and then we for loop over them and use the filter on each one of them. And so what we're going to check is each item in the list, for each space-separated value, is there a match? And so what this will do for us, so say now that, oops, demo fail. I need to save the file. There we go. So now what this will do, I actually lied before. I'm still going to fail if I say Pistol and Sally. Oops, still getting some issues. Hold up. Didn't save the index. Okay. So if I do Pistol and Sally, it's still going to fail. But let's say I know I want to find some guy named Pistol, and he likes cats. Before, if I had typed Pistol space cat, I would not have found this entry. But now it's taking each entry, splitting it up, and looking at each model and saying, do you have Pistol somewhere, and do you have cat somewhere? So this way, it's a little bit more powerful. And for users, if you've got like a big list of people, and all they know is like, I know their first name's this, and their last name starts with a D, they could do that, and it would help find those things.
So it just takes the list, and on the first word, it breaks the list.
Right. So we're essentially using the filter for every space-separated value in the model. So I think it's fun. We use it in some of our apps. Jonathan helped develop that one, so give him some credit for that. Yay! But we still, you know, I want to be able to find everybody who has a birthday in January, but I just can't do it. There is no filter in Angular that will let you search over dates. So let's make one. So we will get rid of this. We will bring to light the 3rd edition. So this will fail because there isn't anything called date search, but we're going to make it. So, as everybody knows, to make a filter, you call .filter on a module, and then you pass it any properties that it needs. In this case, we're going to use the filter again, the filter service. So we'll inject it. And then every filter just returns a function. Our function will take the list, and it will take whatever we type. So, to cover our bases, if the query is not defined, or the list is not defined, just return the list. Otherwise, we're going to make a new list out of the list and return it. So it's really important that when you do a filter, especially if you're doing it over a list, do not modify the original list. You need to produce a new list. Otherwise, that will have far-reaching consequences with anything else that is bound on anything in that list. You will basically delete things out of the list, and that's not what you want to do. What you really want to do is say, Angular, this is what you gave me. These are the criteria that matched based on what my filter does. So now if we run this, we should see some good stuff, and our filter's not going to do anything because we're just always returning the list. But then there's one more thing we got to do. I got to say control.search. So, right, so now it is, because I wasn't using the right property. So it's returning an empty list. So now let's try to figure out how we can identify the dates. So you may be familiar with the date filter in Angular, and we can jump to the documentation for it. So you can format dates, and they've got these nice little string representations. You can get it to look exactly how you want. And they also predefine some filters that you can pass to the date filter, and it'll make it look like these over here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the date filter. We're going to use a few date filters and do something similar to what we did on the second filter that we made. We're going to call the date filter on a bunch of these different values and find out if what they typed in that box matches any of these filtered values. So if they typed SEP or SEP3 or September, we want that to be able to find anything that makes sense. So I have already went through and grabbed all the different filters that I thought would be useful. And so these are the filters, the Angular predefined filters, and some that I've defined that we want to match against whatever they're typing in the box. So then let's just grab it, and we will use it, and we'll explain how it's going to work. Okay, so we want to go through the list, and for each item on the list, we're going to call this function. Then we will iterate through the properties on each item in that list, because we're going to be looking for properties that are date type properties. So we will call item.has own property to make sure that it's a property that's actually on this object and not something that's inherited from a parent object if it's used prototypal inheritance. And then we want to make sure that it's either a date, and you can use this Angular date function for that, or if it's a number. So maybe they've got it in a long format. So we want to be able to check all those. This doesn't currently support if it's just a text string that is typed out to be a date. We're going to ignore that because we're going to say that's not really a date. And that would match anyway. If you typed September and it had the word September, it would match. So we want to find the ones where it's not that obvious. So then what we'll do is for each one of these filters up here that we've defined, we are going to call the Angular date filter. We will hand it the property that we've determined is a date, and we will run it through that filter. So that'll give us back September 3rd, 2012, or whatever the filter gives us back. Then we'll lowercase it and find out if, when we lower the query, if we lowercase the query, if that is found anywhere in there. And if so, and we haven't already added this item to the list because it had some other property that matched, then we will add it, we'll break out of this loop for that filter and move on. Then we return the matches. So the tilde is just a really fancy way of finding out if query.toLowercase and the index of it is not -1. So in other words, it was found somewhere in there. So that tilde does that. You could also say, if you wanted this to be really converted to a true Boolean, you could do not tilde, and then this would give you a true false value to tell you whether what you passed index of was found in the first thing. So yeah, but we don't really need it to be a strictly true false value. This will work. So then if we come back, we refreshed, start typing January. Yes, but what if I say Jan 4? Yes, still works. Let's say we want to actually type it out. That works too. So just by using a few of the built-in filters that are already there, we are now able to filter by date. So people can search for a date and they can find it in there. So that's just one example of how you can make filters more powerful and how you can use them to give your users the data that they really want. I'm all about having a really nice search box, one search box to rule them all, make it really smart, make a really good filter that gives the people the data that they want. This is all available on GitHub. If you go to my GitHub, github.com/EricDonahue, you will find this up there, and I've screencasted this, and then there'll be a YouTube video up soon with a link to that up there in the GitHub if you want to learn more. But otherwise, are there any questions?
Did you ever get working with some concerns on multiple objects?
Yeah, so you could do that. I haven't written that filter here. If you want help with that, I can help you out with it. Anything else? All right, that's it. Thanks for your time.